Ricky Starks shows up in NXT, but just how big of a deal is this? And Jey Uso chooses Gunther for what's one scenario where that match still doesn't happen. It's time to roll around the ring. It's not often we kick off the show with NXT, but they had a big week, of course. Vengeance Day with Jordan Grace showing up there and a Retribution style group at the end of that show. But back to Tuesday night and the random, shocking, sudden debut of Ricky Starks in NXT. A huge deal for the timing of it and just who it is. We all know the story surrounding Ricky Starks. Hasn't been used in AEW in about a year. He had an interview recently with CVV talking all about that. And now he shows up in NXT. And this comes just over 24 hours after the news broke that himself, Malachi Black, Miro, all no longer on the AEW roster page on their website. And then 24 hours later, Ricky Starks, just like that, is in NXT. And when this happened, you thought, okay, post-WrestleMania surprise, Raw or SmackDown after a WrestleMania surprise, and that would have been huge, right? But this is such a big deal, and I don't think a lot of fans realize it just for the fact that this happened on a Tuesday night in NXT, which of course is still treated as the developmental for WWE, but this is such a huge deal, and Triple H realizes it. Shawn Michaels realizes it. They posted about it, and you can just tell there's a difference, right? You hear a lot of times where they say the future of the business, the future of the company, and they say that about a lot of different stars, men and women that come in, but with Ricky Starks, it feels very, very true. And look, he's bigger than NXT, which means he'll be on the main roster sooner rather than later. I would say within a year. But this happened in NXT, and this happened when it did for a couple different reasons that make sense. Because yes, it would have made more sense. He could have ended up right to the main roster. He's that big of a star. Obviously, post-WrestleMania is when you expect surprises. But Triple H does things against the norm. Shawn Michaels, they do things against the norm, right? So when you look at this, the timing of it, nobody was expecting it, right? Especially with the news breaking the day before, you thought, okay, within the next couple months, all three could end up in WWE. So why not go against the norm and shock the world with a name like this? That's number one. Number two, why NXT? Well, the main roster, we're already on the road to WrestleMania. Of course, Ricky Starks just got let go from AEW the day before, so I don't know that they planned on having him available when they did. And where are you going to squeeze them in, right? We're already looking at the WrestleMania card like, what the hell is that going to look like? In a good way, right? There's a lot going on in the world title matches, the chamber matches, and the potential of who could show up for a WrestleMania story. So it makes sense not to force Ricky Starks onto the main roster and have him get cluttered in the road to WrestleMania. Go to NXT where he can look like a huge star, basically a big fish in a smaller pond. All due respect to NXT right now. And Ricky Starks is that big of a star. So you have the timing of it. You also factor in the fact that he has not been used on TV in a year. Post WrestleMania is still over 2 months away. If you have Ricky Starks available now, you want to grab him now. And the fact that he's been basically sidelined for a year, you want to get him back on TV sooner rather than later. So yes, get him on NXT where he can be on TV for a few months, be that big fish on a smaller pond, look like a huge star. So it's an even bigger deal when he ends up in the main roster, because this is huge. When they talk about the future of WWE, now that Ricky Starks is under the WWE umbrella, under Triple H and Shawn Michaels' creative mind, the star that he could potentially become and looks to be en route to becoming is huge. This is a dude that could be headlining WrestleMania within 5 years, or at least in a big match on the WrestleMania card. And his connection with Cody Rhodes does not hurt anything with Cody being the face of WWE right now. This is such a huge deal, and it happening on a Tuesday night in NXT does not show how big of a deal this is for WWE. And when you look at names like Cody Rhodes and Jade Cargill and CM Punk that AEW has lost to WWE as of late, this within 5 years could be at the top of that list of the biggest what ifs for AEW. On Raw, Jey Uso made it official, choosing Gunther for the world title match at WrestleMania. And look, I still am not convinced that this match between Jey Uso and Gunther will take place one-on-one at WrestleMania. And I don't think any wrestling fan since Triple H has taken over should be convinced after what we saw to the road to WrestleMania last year. All my trust is lost in terms of what that final card for WrestleMania will look like until we get to WrestleMania weekend, because we know how all the twists and turns and all the different, potential matches we thought last year could have ended up being, and then we ended up with a 2-night main event. So I'm not convinced that we're getting Jey Uso and Gunther one-on-one. And there is one specific scenario where I could see this match not taking place one-on-one, but Jey Uso still getting that world title opportunity, because right now the Elimination Chamber is basically to decide who will face Cody Rhodes for his title at WrestleMania. Well, we still haven't heard from The Rock. And I am still thinking The Rock should be involved in WrestleMania. He cut that promo after the Raw debut on Netflix about the ride that he's going to take people on, and he has not taken anybody on any ride because he has not been seen since. Roman Reigns, of course, tied up with Seth Rollins and CM Punk potentially and out with injuries. So what could The Rock do? Well, The Rock is the final boss, right? The Rock has some ownership and power at the top, and he used it last year to get himself involved in WrestleMania. So why not him do the same this year? You have the winner of the Elimination Chamber think they're facing Cody Rhodes for the title, but The Rock implements his final boss status to put himself in that match one-on-one with Cody Rhodes. That would then cause some friction between himself and Triple H on screen, and then you could shift the winner of the Elimination Chamber into the Gunther Jey Uso story and give us a triple threat match between Gunther, Jey Uso, and the winner of that Elimination Chamber, and that gives The Rock his one-on-one title match with Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania. You can leave Roman Reigns with CM Punk and or Seth Rollins for Mania, and that's one scenario where Jey Uso still gets his moment, but that one-on-one match with Gunther, I am still not convinced is going to be on the final card for this year's WrestleMania. On the women's side of things, Charlotte Flair chose Tiffany Stratton to face at WrestleMania, this taking place on SmackDown. And Charlotte was my prediction to win the Royal Rumble, whether people like it or not. And it makes a lot of sense. It's the perfect opponent for WrestleMania and Tiffany Stratton and her title run to make her look as big of a star as they're trying to make her become. Charlotte Flair is fully going into that heel run, and Tiffany is taking a babyface role here as she should. The fans obviously have loved her for the past year, and I love the fact that we implemented Trish Stratus into this storyline on SmackDown. Trish will team with Tiffany at Elimination Chamber. Of course, Trish Stratus, the Hall of Famer, the legend. Everyone loves Trish Stratus. So who else better to pair Tiffany Stratton with at the final PLE before WrestleMania to add to that babyface power, to add to the star power of Tiffany Stratton heading into her match with Charlotte Flair come WrestleMania. I mean, you're talking about back-to-back PLEs where she's teaming with Trish and then facing Charlotte one-on-one at WrestleMania. They're turning Tiffany into a huge star in the perfect possible way. So I love it for Tiffany in that sense. And I also don't hate that you're giving Trish Stratus a potential opportunity to have another WrestleMania match. She had her back and forth with Nia Jax in the Royal Rumble match, and now she gets involved with Nia on SmackDown. It gets Nia on the card. She deserves to be on the card after the year she's had in the women's division. Trish and Nia could definitely be a WrestleMania match, but Trish teaming with Tiffany is the perfect way to build Tiffany's babyface star power heading into her WrestleMania title match. Looking at the Elimination Chamber matches on the men's and women's side, and on the men's side, Logan Paul and Damian Priest qualifying. On the women's, Chelsea Green and Bayley being added to the field. And starting with the men's, and it's no disrespect to Damian Priest. I'm a huge Priest fan, and I get it. You want to make him look important since coming over to SmackDown. But Jacob Fatu definitely deserved to be in this chamber match with how hot he has been. It would have made a lot of sense to put him on that big spotlight. No, I had no expectation of him winning it. But with Jacob Fatu, the work that he's been doing, he deserved to be in this spot. Priest, I feel like, needs to kind of get some more traction throughout 2025 before we get him back into the world title picture. I don't think it's completely random. It makes sense still. Priest is a former world champion, just came over to SmackDown, but I would have loved to see Fatu in this match. It does look as if we're getting a Jacob Fatu Solo Sikoa story. which is fine. It gets Solo Sikoa on the WrestleMania card and gives Jacob Fatu a WrestleMania spot. If that's the one-on-one match that we go with, again, it's very similar to the Solo Roman story, but it's something that needs to be done with the popularity that Jacob Fatu has. And at some point, you need to break him off from Solo. So I'd rather them do it sooner rather than later so we can continue this Jacob Fatu push. I do worry in that match, in that scenario, what that means for Solo Sikoa in the long run, because I don't see Solo defeating Jacob Fatu in that potential one-on-one match. I don't think that makes much sense for the ride that Jacob Fatu is on right now to the top of the card. Solo Sikoa, of course, has not necessarily panned out the way many thought he would as a singles heel. He's not horrible, don't get me wrong, but he's not the guy that they thought he could be to go one-on-one with Roman Reigns within that bloodline story. On the women's side of things, I'm looking at Bayley getting in over Lyra Valkyria, and that's just something that doesn't make much sense. Bayley is all over the place right now, and rightfully so. She's a huge star. Shout out to her in the Celebrity All-Star game for the NBA on Friday night. But she's back and forth from NXT, so what's the point of putting her in this match? She just had a WrestleMania moment last year. She's not going to get it this year. And again, she's back and forth to NXT, and she's got this feud with Roxanne Perez. So why even involve her here when you have Lyra Valkyria, who just became the Intercontinental Champion and could use this to her reputation to be involved in a match like this heading into WrestleMania? Lyra definitely felt like she needed this more than Bayley. And then when you look at the potential winners for both chamber matches, if you're looking on the women's side of things and the way the field is shaping up, especially with Jordynne Grace showing up in NXT, which I thought she could have been in the WrestleMania match with Rhea Ripley, the only one that makes sense in the women's chambers match to face Rhea Ripley that isn't just a rematch is Bianca Belair. But that doesn't add up when you talk about the fact that this Jade Cargill story is still looming over. They brought that back up finally on SmackDown, and it's not going to be Liv and Raquel. I don't think it should be Naomi, because that just feels like, I don't know, just a letdown in terms of what this story could have been. It definitely felt like we were going to a Bianca Jade story come Mania. Of course, we don't know Jade's availability for Mania. Maybe that's a part of it. Bianca and Rhea is a huge match, but the story being told should be between Bianca and Jade. But I guess Bianca and Rhea could work until we get to that Jade story. It just feels like we're kind of stalling at that point. So I'm looking at that for the women's chamber. Bianca is really the only one that makes sense, even if a Roxanne Perez gets in on Raw. If you look up and down the women's card of the chamber match and who's already told a story with Rhea, even though she has her story with Jade, Bianca's the only one that really checks out for a WrestleMania match with Rhea. We're also getting Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn one-on-one at the Elimination Chamber, and that's exactly where I thought it should have been. It makes a lot of sense with it being in Toronto and Canada, and of course the history those two have, and to give the Chamber some big matches. Again, every PLE feels like a big deal. This is at the Rogers Center in Toronto for the first time since WrestleMania 18 in 2002. This is a big deal. It's not just the final PLE before WrestleMania and just kind of a throwaway to get your final title matches. Up and down this card needs to feel huge, and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in Canada, it feels huge. And this 100%, it should be setting up a Kevin Owens Randy Orton match come WrestleMania. Clearly Cody is going to be involved with someone else from the Chamber for his title match, or maybe The Rock. So maybe we don't get that Randy Orton Cody match just yet. Randy Orton, Kevin Owens at WrestleMania. I fully expect Randy Orton to be at the Chamber, if not soon after. I understand the history with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I know this could have easily been a WrestleMania match. We've kind of been there, done that, even though it was in front of half a crowd right after the pandemic. And again, Sami Zayn, I still worry about him after this. I mean, I don't see him beating Kevin Owens or whatever this may be. Kevin Owens, this is his story. It's not Sami Zayn's story. Sami's just kind of a part of it. And if we just pivot to KO and Orton after this, where does that leave Sami Zayn? I've been saying it over and over. He needs a spark. This is a great match. This is a great moment. But what happens to Sami Zayn after this leading into WrestleMania is a big question mark. But this is a perfect setup for Kevin Owens and Randy Orton to have their one-on-one match come WrestleMania in Vegas. And there was a stare down on Raw between AJ Styles and Bron Breakker. I had a hard time taking it seriously with Bron Breakker wearing a hat. It may have just been me, but that just kind of completely took my attention, but it is a big deal. Bron Breakker and AJ Styles for the IC title. I mean, you saw Bron Breakker do a little stare down with Gunther a few months back. It feels like Triple H is just kind of, testing out the waters of what could be a WrestleMania match, because we also saw AJ Styles go back and forth with Logan Paul in the Royal Rumble match, which made people think you're getting Logan Paul and AJ Styles come WrestleMania. I think I'd go this route. I think it makes a lot of sense, a little bit more sense than AJ and Logan Paul. That's a match we could get to, maybe a SummerSlam, which is 2 nights this year in New York. So AJ and Bron, it's a bigger level match for Bron Breakker as the Intercontinental Champion heading into WrestleMania. Of course, he's not going to be paired off with Gunther for this year's WrestleMania, but Bron Breakker definitely deserves a big match, not just thrown together feel for this year's WrestleMania. And AJ Styles is the perfect guy with the perfect reputation to give him just that. But this could also affect the Elimination Chamber match, because if we're not getting AJ Styles and Logan Paul come WrestleMania, Logan Paul could be paired off with John Cena, right? But if we're going to get Logan Paul and John Cena at WrestleMania, that means something needs to happen between those two at the Chamber. Logan potentially screwing Cena over his moment to set up that feud, but that also means that neither Logan Paul or John Cena are winning the Elimination Chamber. Seth Rollins is probably going to get in over Finn Balor, so this chain effect could lead to either Drew McIntyre or CM Punk being the winner for this year's Elimination Chamber and getting that title shot for Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania. That would leave Logan Paul to go one-on-one with John Cena if we're getting this AJ Styles Bron Breakker IC title match come WrestleMania. So it kind of has a chain effect into the Chamber match for the WrestleMania card. But AJ Styles and Bron Breakker, sign me up for WrestleMania weekend for the IC title. Shifting to AEW Grand Slam in Australia, some of the biggest moments there, starting with the biggest, the main event, Toni Storm defeating Mariah May for the women's title, getting that women's title back. And I was shocked. Yes, I did not fully expect them to go this route. I don't 100% love it because I don't love Mariah May dropping the title, but I don't hate it either, because how could you not love timeless Toni Storm? And there's a few different reasons why they went this route and why it makes sense that they went this route. Number one is Toni Storm breaking back into that timeless character so quick. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for her to do that just to lose the title match to Mariah May. So even though it feels like a back and forth, you kind of had to do that to not ruin the moment of her breaking back into that character a couple weeks ago. I felt like she broke back into it a little too quick. I feel like her losing as the rookie Toni Storm at Grand Slam could have helped her break into that character, and then you tell the story from there. I feel like that's one big reason why they had to go this route. And if you look it up and down the Grand Slam card, that crowd did not really get a big babyface moment. Mercedes Moné retained against Harley Cameron, and we'll talk about the Jon Moxley situation. He choked out Cope. The opener was awesome. Okada retained against Buddy Matthews, so they really never got that moment, so this needed to be their moment. Otherwise, you just have all the heels retaining their titles, no title changes, and the crowd in Australia is like, well, what the hell? All of our favorites lost, and no title changes happened, no big moments happened, so this kind of played the role of that big moment. But the other big reason why this made sense was the women's division is struggling. Mariah May and Toni Storm are really the only two stars that they have. So yes, they're kind of going back and forth with the title. It isn't too quick. Of course, Mariah won it back in August, so she had a nice run. But who else in that women's division can hold that title right now? Mercedes, of course, has the TBS title and a bunch of other titles from a bunch of other places. Willow's cool. Chris Statlander's cool. But are they at that level to being a world champion? I don't think so. This is, again, lack of developing the women's division into a bunch of stars where you have a bunch of potential title contenders. Right now, Mariah May, Toni Storm, and Mercedes Moné are the only three that fully fit that bill. Mercedes Moné already has her title, so Toni Storm and Mariah May kind of just have to play back and forth with theirs. When you look at the world title situation, Jon Moxley and Claudio getting that win over Cope and Jay White. I absolutely love the pairing of Cope and Jay White. Looking at them on Dynamite, it just feels as if Jay White brought a younger energy out of Cope, a lot more than FTR ever could. And I love their back and forth. The chemistry was natural between those two on Dynamite this week. Of course, we're waiting for Jay White to get back with Bullet Club Gold because that makes more sense. But I don't know why you have Moxley choke out Cope and win this match clean. The only way this does make sense is if Cope is winning that title come Revolution. Otherwise, you're completely burying Cope to lose the Mox and back-to-back big shows if he fails at Revolution. But does it make sense for him to become world champion at Revolution? I wouldn't go that route. But one scenario that you could go if you're going to have him beat Moxley come Revolution, I love Cope. I just don't feel a world title run does anything for AEW or is if it's necessary right now. But what I do like is Cope defeating Moxley and Christian Cage re-entering that long-standing feud with his best friend Cope, cashing in that contract, going Money in the Bank style as he did a while ago on Cope, and getting that world title. It feels repetitive, yes, but this world title needs to go in a different direction. I'm adamant that Cope isn't the direction we need to go right now. Christian Cage, there's more upside to a title run in the story there than a Cope title run. I wouldn't absolutely hate it because how could you hate Cope? But that's the only route that makes sense after watching Moxley choke out Cope at Grand Slam. Cope has to win that match, but whether or not he walks out of Los Angeles with that world title remains to be seen with Christian Cage having that contract. And then shout out to the Red Hot opener, Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher. That's 4 of the best wrestlers that AEW has to offer right now. And I've said it before, you could easily insert the world title into this picture. Really on any of those 4, of course, probably Ospreay makes the most sense. But this story continues to be the best thing AEW has going, specifically in the men's division. The Revolution matches that were made, Kenny Omega and Takeshita, are going to be great come Revolution. Ospreay and Fletcher, I thought at first, why are we doing this again? And then they put him in a cage. That's why. And again, huge for Fletcher, even though he's not getting the win at Grand Slam. I don't see him beating Ospreay at Revolution, but to be on the cards like this with names like Ospreay and Omega and big matches like that, this story is just slowly building stars for AEW better than any story in the men's division. Takeshita's already a star and a champion. Kyle Fletcher is turning into one. Ospreay and Omega, of course, already are stars. Love the opener. Love the matches for Revolution. Love everything about this story. We also saw the start of an MJF Adam Page feud on Dynamite, and this is desperately needed for MJF. Look, his match with Dustin Rhodes did what it needed to do, but I talked about MJF last week, and the regression in his heel character is real in 2025. And just he's turned into that stereotypical heel that everyone accused him of being. And now this is his opportunity to get back into a big time feud in AEW to step away from that, right? And Adam Page, of course, his credibility, his stock went up with his feud with Swerve Strickland this past year. Again, shout out to Swerve Strickland continuing to make stars for AEW. But this is a big opportunity for MJF to get away from the Jeff Jarrett story, get away from the Dustin Rhodes story, go back to being the guy that everyone thought you were a year and a half ago, the face of AEW, involved in the world title picture, involved in big feuds for the pay-per-views. And Adam Page is a perfect route to go, but it's also the perfect test to see if MJF is that stereotypical heel that everyone accused him of being a while ago, or if he's actually progressed in his storytelling, because stay away from the alcoholic insults when it comes to Adam Page's character. I do not need to hear that in this story. Number one, it doesn't even feel relevant to Adam Page's story anymore. That hasn't really been a big part of his story in well over a year. So that just feels like old reused stuff if they go that route. MJF, it felt as if he was staying away from that in the back and forth they had backstage on Dynamite. I just want to see him stay there, because if MJF falls right back in to the easy, low-hanging fruit, as they say, with alcoholic insults toward Adam Page, and that's the story for this run, it's gonna fall short in terms of what it could be for MJF and for Adam Page. Adam Page, again, his stock rose big time in 2024 after his story with Swerve, and this is a beautiful next step for both Adam Page and MJF. MJF, I feel, needs to go over in the end of this feud at some point. I think you have a couple matches out of it, but MJF, of course, if he is the guy still, he decided to stay in AEW, he decided not to jump ship. Well, you need to push him closer and closer to the world title picture, and obviously losing feuds to Adam Page, losing any feud in terms of a big-time run heading into that world title picture, it doesn't necessarily help that case, but it's a big test to see if MJF has progressed as a heel character. Adam Page, of course, has a bunch of low-hanging fruit that MJF can swipe at. I don't want to see him swipe at it. I don't want to see Jeff Jarrett involved in this anymore. I think you can kind of wipe that under the rug. I don't think there was a lot of interest in there. The match with Dustin Rhodes did what it needed to do, move on to bigger and better things for MJF, and that is this story with Adam Page. And lastly, shout out to the Hurt Syndicate retaining their tag titles against the Guns, and overall, I'm okay with that. I don't feel like the Hurt Syndicate obviously has been treated well since Lashley came over in October, and now we're finally getting that push, that run that this faction deserves. There's gold on them. So, of course, I did not expect them to drop it. But on the other end, the Guns, again, being in Bullet Club Gold over the past year, I know they've been out and Juice Robinson has been out, but that has definitely risen their stock since they stepped away from being the Ass Boys, being Billy Gunn's kids. And again, fans love them. Fans love them with Jay White. So I don't love the fact that we brought them back and rushed them into a title loss, right? They came back and 1 week later, they're getting this title match and they lose clean. Where do you go from here with the Guns? The Guns could be a big part of this tag team division. And this is a story that could have been told at least in the Revolution, if not longer, between these two teams for a tag team division, much like the women's division, which is lacking. These are your top two teams right now. There's not really much depth in that tag team division to be rushing into matches. And then when you have two guys like the Guns, who, again, their star power has continued to build and grow over the past year or so, and you have them come back and rush into a title loss, instantly takes away the spark from their return. Where do you go from here for the Guns? If you just continue to rehash these matches with the Hurt Syndicate, it's going to get old. The Hurt Syndicate at some point, you're going to feel like could be doing something much more important at that point. So I don't love the fact that the Guns rushed into a title loss, but of course, I don't hate the fact that the Hurt Syndicate still hold the gold as tag team champions. Roar Around the Ring is available every week. Find us on YouTube at Roar Around the Ring. I'm Justin Valentine. We'll talk to you guys very soon.